Hi, welcome back to Newsfeed. Today is Thursday, March 29th. I'm Catherine Ragukas, and I'm here today with an in-studio interview with Morgan Showen, who's a student who spoke at last week's March for Our Lives in Ann Arbor. Now let's talk to Morgan. So Morgan, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Catherine. Thank you so much for having me on. So I'm a freshman at the University of Michigan. I am hoping to get into the Ford School of Public Policy next year, currently on track for a political science major, and my hometown is just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Awesome. So what kind of inspired you to come to the march last weekend and speak?
So back home in Ohio, I was the president and founder of a nonprofit youth advocacy group specifically for high school students to lobby their senators and congressmen about specific issues. We were formed off of a guide produced by some former staffers to members of Congress on the Hill. And so the name of the group was Cincinnati Indivisible. We had about 80 members in 12 different high schools. And it's that past experience of youth advocacy, sending people out to marches, going down to visit offices in Cincinnati and otherwise for these different representatives to say that we as students have a voice, that matters. And what the Parkland students have been doing really struck a chord with me. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the top reasons why I reached out to them.
Yeah, so you've done marches in the past then, like gone to rallies and things like that?
Yeah, so we've organized a couple of protests outside of, or at least back when I was with that group, we organized a couple of marches and protests outside of different offices. We made office visits, we participated in the Women's March, and different things like that. So I'm used to this kind of activism.
Yeah, that's great. So a lot of young people, a lot of high school students, obviously a lot of college students attended the march this past weekend, including yourself. Yeah. So why do you think it's so important that so many young people were able to get involved in this kind of activism?
Absolutely. So we have one of the lowest voting rates of any generational group of compared to the baby boomers or Generation X or any other group, that we are always the lowest voting, but we always have, in my opinion, the best outlook on the future, in that we are able to understand that we have our entire lives ahead of us, and the decisions that these legislators and things are making now affect us years into the future. So we are always the ones that have that best optimism, that unspoiled sense of what is possible, of what we can do to change our country and to change the world. And I think that it's we can have so much more power than we actually do in the electorate if we were just to come out and vote. And so having these kind of marches, having these kind of rallies where it's student-led and student-oriented, I think it's a great thing to have, where we can actually get these people politically involved at a younger age than they used to be.
Yeah, that's what's really amazing about this march, is it's completely led by high school students.
Absolutely.
I think that's why a lot of high school students ended up coming out to the march and things. They felt so connected.
Exactly.
So you were one of the speakers before the march began. There were probably about 10 speakers that spoke here. So kind of how did you get involved in that, and what kind of inspired you to speak, and what did you speak about?
Yeah, so I reached out to Celeste. She was one of the leaders and the organizers. She's with Everytown for Gun Safety. She was a survivor of gun violence herself. Her dad was a victim of suicide by firearm a few years ago. And I reached out to her just saying that I have this past. There's only a couple of students speaking. We had one person who did a piece of slam poetry at the beginning, and then we had one high school student in the end. And out of 10 speakers at a student-led movement, I believed it was something that we needed to have more of, more student representation in this. And it became apparent to me that I just needed to reach out and to say, I could do this if you'd like me to. And they gave a resounding yes, and they said, you can have a couple of minutes to just give that message of why students should be involved, why our generation is different. And right before I spoke, we had a survivor of the Las Vegas shooting speak, and she was
very powerful.
It was very powerful. It was very moving. It made me really angry that anyone would have to have that kind of experience ever in their lives, let alone of the thousands that experienced it that day and the thousands that experience it every day in places like Chicago and things that don't get the kind of attention that they really deserve for that kind of gun violence that they're experiencing. And it got when I got up there to speak, it all seemed to click. Everything was just in that right moment of that right time to deliver a speech that could hopefully inspire some of the young Americans to go out and actually try to change this problem of gun violence.
Yeah. So do you kind of hope to, in the future, participate in more activism, more speaking and things like that in a future career, or just get involved?
Absolutely. So this summer I'm working on a campaign for Congress. So I'm an intern back home, And so that'll get me involved with some different things like that. And I hope that I can have more experiences like this, because I feel that that's kind of my place, and I'd love to have a future career in activism and politics in general.
Yeah, and are you involved in any organizations on campus that, if University of Michigan students are interested in getting involved in, that are involved in activism or anything like that?
Yeah, so the Roosevelt Institute, they have their meetings on Wednesday nights. I'm headed to this afterwards, and their main focus is to give progressively minded students a way to think about public policy and do activism in the sense of what we were doing with the March for Our Lives. The two co-leaders for that were there at the march as well, and some of the things related to the activism for that group in particular is, like, last week we took a trip to Lansing to meet with some of the state senators and state representatives about specific issues. There were 4 different issues that our group, along with some other college students from around the state, were going to actually have sit-down meetings with some of the staff members of those senators and representatives. And for me at least, again, another student led idea is that we should allow, like, back in Ohio, we can have it where 17-year-olds, if they're 18 by the general election, they can vote in the primaries. In Michigan, that's not a thing at the moment, and therefore the actual general election is not a wholly representative electorate of what the primary could be. So we were lobbying to pass a bill, Senate Joint Resolution L, that is currently being held up by some of the Republican-led elections committee. But that's something that we lobbied on, and if anything like that sounds like something another University of Michigan student would want to do, I would highly recommend that they reach out to the Roosevelt Institute.
All right, well, thank you very much today for joining us, Morgan. My name's Catherine Ragukas, and this has been Newsfeed.